You didn't want to be liked. Not really. You wanted to be safe. Safe from rejection. Safe from conflict. Safe from the moment someone looks at you differently and decides you're too much or not enough. So you learned something early. If you stayed agreeable, life stayed calmer. If you smiled, nodded, adjusted yourself, nothing broke, at least not on the surface. You became easy to be around. You listened more than you spoke. You sensed what people needed before they asked. And people noticed. They called you kind, reliable, understanding. And for a while, that felt like love. Because being liked felt warm, predictable, secure. But what you were really feeling wasn't connection. It was relief. Relief that no one was upset. Relief that no one left. Relief that you didn't have to explain yourself. So you kept doing it. You softened your opinions. You delayed your truth. You swallowed words that wanted to come out. Not because you were fake, but because honesty felt dangerous. You told yourself you were being mature, that choosing peace was wisdom, that conflict was unnecessary. And maybe at some point it was. But slowly, without noticing, safety became the goal. Not growth, not expression, not aliveness, just safety. You started measuring your choices by how little tension they created, how easy they were for others to accept, how smoothly they kept things moving. And every time you chose safety, you abandoned something small inside yourself, a thought you didn't say, a boundary you didn't set, a desire you didn't follow. Nothing dramatic, just quiet self-erasure. You didn't wake up one day and decide to disappear. You practiced it, one polite moment at a time. You learned which parts of you were welcome and which parts made the room feel uncomfortable. So you edited yourself. You kept the calm parts, the helpful parts, the parts that made people stay. And you hid the rest. Your anger became silence. Your sadness became humor. Your needs became inconvenience. And the strange thing is, people liked you more for it. They felt comfortable around you, unchallenged, unthreatened. But comfort is not intimacy, and safety is not love. Over time, something shifted. You noticed how tired you felt after conversations, how heavy your chest became when you had to respond quickly, how relieved you felt when plans were canceled. You weren't exhausted because you were doing too much. You were exhausted because you were never fully there. You were performing a version of yourself that kept everyone calm, and that performance never ends. Because when your value comes from being agreeable, you're always one disagreement away from losing it. So you avoided conflict. You told yourself it wasn't worth it, that speaking up would only complicate things, that staying quiet was easier. And it was. Easier than risking rejection, easier than being misunderstood, easier than finding out who would still choose you if you stopped adapting. So you stayed safe. But safety has a cost. It costs you your voice, your edges, your sense of self. And you don't notice it immediately. You just feel a little more distant from your own life, a little less excited, a little more numb. You go through the motions, you do what's expected, you say the right things. But inside, there's a tension that never fully leaves. Because some part of you knows, you weren't built to be agreeable. You were built to be real. And real people create friction. They disappoint sometimes. They say the wrong thing. They make others uncomfortable. And that scared you. Because at some point, safety felt more important than truth. You remember moments when you almost spoke up and didn't. Moments when you felt something strongly and softened it. Moments when you wanted to say no and said yes. Not because you agreed, but because disagreement felt like danger. And the longer you did this, the harder it became to stop. Because once you train people to expect your silence, your voice feels like disruption. So you kept choosing peace. But peace without honesty isn't peace. It's suppression. And suppression doesn't disappear. It settles in your body as tension, as fatigue, as that quiet sense that something is missing. You didn't lose yourself overnight. You hid. And hiding feels safe until it becomes lonely. Because people don't know you. They know the version that never challenges them. They don't see your depth, your fire, your truth. And part of you resents them for it. But another part knows you never showed it. One day, you notice something. You don't know what you want anymore. You don't trust your reactions. You second-guess your feelings. Because when you spend years prioritizing safety, you stop listening to yourself. You ask, "Is this okay?" before you ask, "Is this true?" And that's when it hits you. You didn't want to be liked. You wanted to be safe. Safe from being too loud, too honest, too much. But safety was never the same as belonging. Belonging requires risk. It requires showing up without editing yourself into something easier to accept. And that terrifies you. Because if you stop being agreeable, you might lose people. But here's the truth that arrives quietly. The people who only stay when you're silent were never really staying for you. They were staying for your compliance. And that realization hurts, because you invested years in being easy to love instead of being real. But it's also freeing, because it means you don't have to keep disappearing. You don't have to become aggressive or loud or confrontational. You just have to stop abandoning yourself. You start small. You pause before agreeing. You let silence exist. You say what you feel, gently but honestly. Your heart races, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something new. And something surprising happens. The world doesn't collapse. Not everyone leaves. Some people adjust, some don't. And you begin to understand. Being safe kept you protected, but it also kept you unseen. And being seen requires courage. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that says, "This is me," without apology. You realize that you were never too sensitive, too intense, too difficult. You were just trained to believe that comfort was love. But love doesn't require self-erasure. It requires presence. So you begin again. Not by forcing confidence, not by demanding validation, but by choosing truth over safety, one moment at a time. Because the life you want isn't on the other side of being liked, it's on the other side of being honest. And the day you stop choosing safety over yourself is the day you finally feel at home in your own life. If this story felt familiar, take a breath. And remember this: you don't need to be liked to be worthy. You don't need to be safe to be loved. And the people meant for you will meet you where you finally stand. Now, I want to hear from you. Comment below, which moment in this story hit you the hardest? Was it the moment you realized you were exhausted? Was it when you understood that silence wasn't peace? Or was it when you finally recognized that the people staying were only staying for your compliance? Your comment matters, because other people watching this right now need to know they're not alone in this. If you want to go deeper into this, watch these next. You burned out because you were always available. I'll show you how to recognize when you're giving more than you have. Comfort felt like peace, but it wasn't. Because understanding the difference is everything. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because the next video might be the one that changes how you see yourself. Until next time, stay calm, stay honest, and choose yourself, quietly. But most importantly, speak up in the comments. Let me know your story. I read every single one.